Today, we're going to take a story you think you know. I mean, we all have that picture in our heads, right? This gentle woman, binoculars in hand, sitting so patiently in the jungle with the chimpanzees. It's a story about quiet observation, a soft touch. But we're going to put that entire narrative under a microscope and reveal a much more powerful and, frankly, a much more deliberate truth. We are deconstructing Jane Goodall, not as a naturalist, but as a master engineer. Someone who didn't just find truth, but systematically designed a machine to manufacture it.
Okay, let's just jump right in. The myth, the image we all know, is of the gentle naturalist. But the reality, the machine we are analyzing today, is that of a systems engineer. See, Goodall didn't just stumble upon discoveries, and that is the key difference. A systems engineer doesn't hope for a result. They build a system that guarantees one. She meticulously designed a repeatable process, an engine for observation, that was so robust, so effective, it didn't just add to science, it forced the entire scientific world to stop in its tracks and rewrite its own rules. She manufactured truth, not through force, but through pure presence and an absolutely unshakable process.
So here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to walk through the 6 core stages of our engineering project. First, we'll look at the myth versus her machine, to really get a handle on the flawed scientific world she was walking into. Then we'll analyze her so-called unqualified advantage and how it was actually her secret weapon. Third, and this is the big one, we'll deconstruct the heart of her invention, the process of engineering habituation. After that, we'll see how the results from her machine literally broke the existing scientific model. Fifth, we'll look at the ultimate stress test of her method during a brutal war. And finally, we'll boil it all down into the Goodall equation, a powerful formula you can actually use in your own world.
Okay, so first things first. To really get the brilliance of our machine, we have to understand the flawed system she was up against. The scientific industry of the 1960s, well, it treated nature not as a living, breathing system, but as something the source material calls a categorized commodity.
I mean, just think about what that really means. The standard way of doing things for science at the time was fundamentally invasive. Experts would go into the field looking for specimens to collect, usually by trapping them or shooting them with tranquilizer darts. They were hunting for isolated data points to extract, variables to control in a lab. It was a world built on this cold, sterile detachment, on the deeply flawed idea that to understand something living, you first had to capture it, pin it down, and dissect its parts. It was a classic case of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
But Goodall shows up in Gombe and she just sees a completely different way. She knew, almost intuitively, that the real insight, the deepest truth, it wasn't found in capturing some isolated data point. It was in finding the hinge, that one critical, pivotal observation that swings the entire door of understanding wide open. She knew the real power wasn't in force or control. It was in something way harder, achieving a total saturation of the subject's reality, observing the system as it actually operates, not as a scientist wishes it would.
And that leads us right into our second point, which is absolutely critical to understanding her genius. Her ability to see this different path wasn't some happy accident. Nope, it was a direct result of what the establishment saw as her biggest weakness, but what was, in fact, her most powerful strategic asset, her background. She showed up in Gombe with no university degree, just some secretarial experience, a notebook, and this relentless sense of purpose.
Now, what's so fascinating here is how this completely reframes her lack of formal training. The academic world, they looked at her and saw an amateur, someone who was unqualified. But from an engineering perspective, this gave her something we're calling strategic sovereignty. Think about it, right? She hadn't been programmed for years in that capture and control mindset. Her vision wasn't clouded by a bunch of established theories she was supposed to go out and prove. She hadn't been taught what to look for, and this is the most important part, she hadn't been taught what not to see. She was a blank slate, totally free to observe what was actually happening.
This strategic sovereignty, it was the foundation for everything that came next. It meant she wasn't just another cog in the old scientific machine, destined to crank out the same old results. It gave her the freedom to become an architect. She could design and build her own observational engine from the ground up, one engineered to her own specs, totally free from the baggage and the institutional blind spots of standard science.
So the crucial point here is that her past wasn't irrelevant at all. It was actually her secret training ground. Most people would just dismiss secretarial work as a dead end, but Goodall, she leveraged it. I mean, think about the skills you need for that. Meticulous note-taking, incredible organization, managing complex logistics, and almost obsessive attention to detail. This wasn't a waste of time. It was a high-fidelity audit of how complex systems work. While other academics were trained in theory, she was trained in practice.
While they had to learn patience, she was already a master of what we could call the discipline of the wait.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute heart of her machine, the core mechanism she engineered there in the forests of Gombe. And I have to be clear, this was not just watching animals. This was the active, systematic engineering of trust. She didn't just wait for the chimpanzees to accept her. She designed a system to make it inevitable.
She developed this replicable three-step process we're calling the habituation oscillation. So let's break this down. Step 1, isolate. What does that mean? Well, for months, she just existed. She'd find a high peak, wear the same clothes, and just be present, day after day after day. The goal was to achieve a state of total, non-threatening presence, to basically become as neutral a part of the environment as a rock or a tree. Step 2, identify. Now this is the crucial part. She learned to spot the precise moment of oscillation, that super subtle, almost invisible shift when a wild animal's fear gives way to curiosity and then, finally, to acceptance. It's like a change in frequency she had to learn to hear. And step 3, map. Only after that trust was built could she begin the real work, mapping the true social nervous system of the group, seeing them as they really were, not as they behaved when a threat was nearby.
And this slide, wow, it just brilliantly illustrates her method in action. The scientific establishment was appalled by this. They told her, you have to use numbers to maintain a cold, detached, objective distance. This was the numbering script. But she flat out rejected it. And listen, this is key. It wasn't just because it felt nicer or was more sentimental. No, it was a calculated strategic choice. By giving the chimpanzees names, David Greybeard, Flo, Fifi, she was engineering a connection. She created what our source calls behavioral activation. She was using individual resonance to close that trust gap, which unlocked a depth of social and emotional observation that her peers, with their numbered subjects, could never ever hope to achieve.
So, what happens when a new machine, a totally new engine for seeing the world, starts to produce results? Well, it doesn't just add to the old model, it breaks it. The output of her system was so profound, it created a shockwave that fundamentally changed how we understand the world.
And this is the key question her work really posed to the entire scientific community. When you build a radically new way of seeing, one based on strategic sovereignty and engineered trust, what does it actually produce? What kind of truth comes out the other end when you remove the observer's bias and the subject's fear?
The answer is a proof of concept, a truth so undeniable that it forces a complete reevaluation of everything you thought you knew. For Goodall, that moment came in October of 1960. After months of meticulously applying her system, she looked through her binoculars and observed a chimpanzee she had named David Greybeard, and he was carefully stripping leaves from a twig, then inserting that twig into a termite mound to fish for insects. He was making and using a tool. This wasn't just some interesting behavior. This was it. This was the hinge she had been looking for.
This famous telegram from her mentor, Louise Leakey, just captures the sheer magnitude of the blast. Her discovery didn't just add a new fact to the textbooks. It detonated one of the core defining assumptions of what it meant to be human, that we alone were man, the toolmaker. The observational machine she had so carefully built and deployed in that jungle had produced a result so powerful, so undeniable, that the entire field of anthropology had no choice but to stop, recalibrate, and redefine one of its most foundational beliefs.
So, after that breakthrough, her observational system was put to the ultimate test. It had proven it could reveal intelligence and even tenderness. But could it map the darkest, most complex social dynamics? Could it hold up under the strain of documenting tribalism, violence, and war?
4. That's how many years the conflict lasted. From 1974 to 1978, Goodall used her relentless, patient system to document what became known as the Gombe Chimpanzee War. It was a brutal, systematic, and drawn-out conflict between two competing factions that ended in the complete annihilation of one of the groups. A lot of observers would have turned away, deciding it was too ugly or too disturbing to fit their narrative of peaceful primates. But she didn't. She did exactly what her system was designed to do: observe, record, and understand without bias and without sentiment.
By documenting the war, she proved her mind and her method had become something more than just a tool for observation. It was now what you could call a behavioral recognition weapon. It was this finely tuned instrument capable of mapping the deepest social currents of an entire society. She was layering thousands of hours of observation, deconstructing the community's social hierarchy, not as some static list, but as a living, breathing fortress of power, of shifting alliances, and of brutal betrayals. It's like she could practically see the thought process of the group unfold in real time.
So the crucial point is this. By refusing to look away from that darkness, she stress-tested her observational engine to its absolute limit, and it held. She proved her process could map not just tool use and maternal bonds, but the very foundations of tribalism, aggression, territory, and organized conflict. And in doing so, she forced us all to confront the really uncomfortable truth that these impulses run far deeper than we had ever imagined.
This entire engineering project, from her strategic freedom to the habituation process to the stress test of war, it all leads to a final universal principle. It's an equation for discovering the unvarnished truth in any complex system, whether that's a jungle, a boardroom, or your own life.
And here it is, the Goodall equation. It's got two main inputs. First, you have systemic presence. That's that deep, committed, unbiased observation where you just become part of the system's background noise. Then you add to that habituation, the active, systematic process of engineering trust and becoming a totally neutral part of the environment. And what's the output? Sovereign truth. A fundamental, unvarnished truth that is independent of your own biases and is almost always completely missed by the people who are just rushing for a simple answer or an easy data point.
And this is your takeaway. This is how you can apply her logic. First, find your own Gombe peak. Identify a routine, system in your work or your life that you just accept without question. Maybe it's that weekly meeting that feels totally pointless, or a project workflow that always seems to hit the same snag, or even a recurring family dynamic. Second, commit to presence. For just 1 week, stop participating and start truly observing. Watch the mechanics, the power shifts, the unspoken rules. And third, look for the hinge. Search for that one hidden truth, that unseen leverage point that once you see it, changes your entire understanding of the system. Because, as Jane Goodall's entire life's work as an observational engineer proves, rushing to a conclusion, that's easy. Force is a simple choice. But patience is a technology. It is a superpower. It is the only documented antidote to bias. And it is the ultimate strategic weapon that can allow you to deconstruct and reveal the unseen architecture of the world all around you.